Hi everyone, welcome to the Quantum Bridge. Myself, Gary, and my co-host Casper, as usual. Hello, Casper.
Hello,
Keep
mate.
well, mate. It's a sunny old day in England today, which is a rarity. But even better than that, we have a new guest, and I'm going to pass over to you, Casper, to introduce them for us today.
Goodness, you're getting so professional. So
I know.
you're basically calling our new guest another ray of sunshine.
There you go.
Right, yeah, he's absolutely right. Apologies for any background noise. Life is going on behind me, but as long as that's not too much of an issue, we've got Magalie with us today. Now, I could probably pronounce Magalie's surname, but I think I'm going to allow her to do that. I'm very, very lucky to know her and to know something about her world. But without further ado, welcome, Magalie, and please tell us a bit about what you are, what you do, and the world you currently inhabit.
Hello, everyone. Hello, Gary. Hello, Caspar. I'm very delighted to be here today. So let's start with my full name, Magalie Valadier Jagate, because I ended up married in this country as well.
Brilliant. I was right not to say that. Good.
But my herbalist name is mainly Magalie Valadier, so let's stick to that. But Magalie is good as well. So, wow, where to start? So basically, I'm a herbalist, a medical herbalist. That is my title, but I'm a little bit more than that. I've done quite a few various trainings, and I was actually thinking about this morning. I was thinking, where did it even start? And I think if I really have to go back, is because a lot of people train into a healing profession because they themselves used that healing method beforehand. And then they end up going, oh, you know, craniosacral worked really well for me. I'm now going to become a craniosacral therapist. But that didn't really happen for me. I actually had never even seen a herbalist before I decided to train. So I was born into a family of psychiatrists for children. So both my mom and dad. And they were very marginal in the way they kind of explore the going down into like a somatic / emotional healing for children. And they were very clear about the fact that they never wanted to prescribe drugs. And a lot of it was just around, how do we hold someone and allow someone to express themselves? So that's how I was raised, allowing to express myself. And surrounded with homeopathic remedies, herbal healing from my grandparents, organic food. It was all about diet. So I grew a lot into that. And then once I became a teenager, I decided to completely dismiss it and went a different way and ended up in London. And then I became an FD, and I'm not going to go into all of that, but that was like a different life until I became pregnant. And so that was 9 years ago. And when that happened, for some reason, everything reopened from what I was offered from my childhood. And so that's how it started. I started to train around women, birth into being, supporting women. Birth into being is working a lot with the limbic imprint, how you're born and how this is traumatic and how you recode that imprint. And then as soon as that happened, I decided to basically move out of London into the countryside. And I was already starting to grow a garden in London. And it just almost like a vision came through that I had to train with the plant and work with the plant, but bring that into a completely different way. I don't really like the word holistic because it's used in every direction.
Well, it's lost its meaning somewhat, actually. Yeah.
It has, yes. But in a way, so I kind of like the word full spectrum healing, which I don't even really know if it exists. And some people use it in Reiki and things like that, but this is quite different. So I train as a medical herbalist, which is the very traditional approach where you learn a little bit like a GP, you learn the condition, the disease, you know, what the plant does. So we're still within labeling a lot of things. And I also train on the side with someone called Nathaniel who does intuitive herbalism. And with that, you really work with the plant from meeting the plant spirit. And it's very beautiful because you walk away completely from labeling. It's not what is that plant is good for. It's not what condition do you have. It's in that very moment right now, who am I and how do I resonate with this plant in this very moment? And that will be very unique and different each time with different people. So that's the very core of my practice. But within that, I also train as a soul retrieving therapist. So working with past life, ancestral healing, inner child, and what we call set personalities. So all of these things, they kind of weave into the kind of herbalism that I'm approaching. And essentially, so to try to really like bring the core of it, I think for me it is when someone comes here and wants to discuss either an emotional issue, a psychological issue, or a very physical symptom, it actually doesn't really matter because all of these things are just an expression of that person. So it's an expression of something that hasn't been resolved, either in this lifetime, either through ancestral or past life. And the body is just expressing something. So instead of looking at it through, let's get rid of it, let's find a herb that's going to sort you out, which is quite similar to, you know, the Western style of medicine. It's, well, no, let's just go in and let's just go and listen. What is the body speaking of? And just really holding that space through presence and connection to that person's center with the plant, because the plant is also they're very powerful, very beautiful teachers to bring us into this kind of centered, slow space.
Can I just ask, Magalie, is when you're doing your practice and so on, and you're with a client, are you surrounded by different types of herbs physically, and are you sort of presenting them in any way, or is this very much that you're picking up through your intuition what you might need to go and grab in a moment, or what you might talk about with the client? How does that aspect of it work?
So it's really interesting what you're asking here, because it just makes me realize how little rules I have in the practice, and it's just so different for each cases. But the general approach would be, generally, I tend to choose the plant, yes, but it is not to say that it is always the case, because it very much depends as to what happens on the day. So quite often before someone comes, I'll start having some things that come forth, you know, maybe 20 minutes, 15 minutes before the actual appointment. And I'll just feel, you know, I'll go out, I might go for a walk, and either I'll literally will hear something, you know, a plant talking, saying, hey, you need me today, pick me up, you know, we need to deal with masculine energy, or you know, sometimes it just comes very clearly. It can be a voice, it can be a visualization, or sometimes even the day before, I know this is going to be the plant. And sometimes that happens, and then 5 minutes before, no, change of plan, we're doing something else. But yeah, it's working from that trust. And I think as well, so I work a lot with animals. We have a small holding here, which is also what took me to the herbalist practice, the desire to be self-sufficient and through healing and food. And if you look, so that really taught me, you know, watching animals, the sheep, the horses, the alpacas, even the birds, they don't talk like us. They're not using a language like with words, or not that we can understand, but they are a lot more present, and they work a lot with imitation. If they see one is scared or one is you know, excited, they'll go into the movement, they'll mimic that. And so it's very similar here. It's almost like I'm tuning into that person that's coming in, and through what I am feeling, I am trusting that I am actually able to perceive what they're feeling, and then I will go with that, and that will guide me through the choice of the plant as well. And the same through the session, you know, once the session starts, it's really using this kind of mammal, we kind of, the cortex, the idea is that the cortex is not there anymore, it's switched off. We really go into that limbic brain, limbic and reptilian, you know, the more animalistic.
Yeah.
So yeah, and that is kind of, don't know if I really answered your question, Casper.
No, I think that's great. I mean, I love the idea, and it's very much a big part of the channel, this movement from sort of a third density type, very much sort of factual and cerebral sort of worldview, into this much more profound sense of intuition, and those, as you've talked about, the sort of conversations with things that most people, until probably fairly recently, have thought is just too much for them to take on. The idea that you can have a type of communication with plants or with your animals that is as interesting, diverse, as deep, as nourishing as any of those that you might have, and maybe far more so with that more sort of right brain, left brain side of things. Can you just talk, just for my edification, really, a bit more about when you're saying that you're hearing the plants themselves, is this a sort of intuitive connection that brings forth ideas, or are you literally hearing on some occasions actual formed words or concepts coming to you? How does, I know it's hard to discuss this sort of stuff, but how does that manifest?
Yeah, but it's a very much felt perception, isn't it? And it's interesting, because I was actually going to bring this through the first question that you had, but I'll go into it a little bit. So because you see, you can get the patient to also choose their plant, but often what happens when they come here, they are overloaded, through this society that we live in, the fast path of living, the blue light, all of these things. So actually, it's very hard for them to distinguish what is theirs, what is others, where is their center, what is their, what is their intuition, what is anxiety, because even intuition and anxiety, very interesting. They can seem similar, but they're very different. So myself, I had to go through that very deep process of, peeling layers, because in order to be able to hear these voices, and yes, I do hear clear words at time, not always, it's very different.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
But my very own work was to really understand what is my, am I being triggered now, or am I feeling someone else's emotion? Because that's very different, or am I going out, and is this anxiety can be very loud, usually tend to be very loud, very repetitive, overriding people. So now I know when it's a very loud, that's not an outside voice. This is my own anxiety. But if it's very subtle, very gentle, and you kind of really feel it comes through the center. It's very hard to explain, because that's my felt experience. And the only way for me to now be very comfortable with it is that each time I hear these little voices and I bring the plant in, they will tell me something about the person that's coming, and I will not disclose that at all during the session, during the start. And the person will come and bring the theme that the plant asked me to bring in the session. And that's a very deep confirmation,
Absolutely.
This outside plant is really talking. So yes, that's basically the journey with it.
No, that's incredible. I've got many questions. So rather than me rabbit on, I know Gary he'll be feeling as well. He's very much an empath and an intuitive guy. So Gary, maybe there's some things that are coming up for you that you want to mention.
Yeah, it's more the practical stuff, really, though. I'm sort of wondering the difference there, where you're saying you're getting the messages from the plants themselves. So is it different from, say, like Chinese medicine or apothecary, where you've got like a medicine cabinet and you're like a little bit of this, a little bit of that?
Yes.
Have you moved? Did you start there, or did you move away from that?
Yes.
How has that
Yeah,
progressed?
thank you for this. That's really important to clarify. So I'm not going to talk a lot, but obviously, so I do use Chinese medicine, not for myself. So I have seen Chinese practitioners actually since childhood, acupuncture. So it's a very different system. It's a very ancient, and I deeply respect it, but it's very different. They work with meridian and with what plant does. And so does Ayurveda, which might even be more ancient. Whether it's really more ancient or not, we don't know. But the writings are that they found are more ancient. And it's, again, a different things, because they work with doshas and body. So what is your body type? And then the Western herbalism here in the UK, mostly how it's taught is a bit similar to Western medicine. It's different because it's still more holistic. We take the whole picture of the patient and we take more time, but they will still go through diagnosing, what is that person condition is, and then what herb is good for what condition. And they'll work a lot indirectly as well. So addressing diet, lifestyle, and so if somebody comes with headache, they're not just going to give a herb for headache. We're going to work with the digestive system, the liver. We work all around it. So in that way, it is holistic. But when you go into intuitive herbalism, I'm not saying you completely forget all of that, because I do use a little bit of tinctures, especially for cases where, you know, people are really suffering from something and it's debilitating, and I know that some herbs can come in. So sometimes those labeling are very useful, and also, you know, they come from the Druids, and, you know, actually those very herbalists used to do, the way they learned those plants is similar to the intuitive approach. They slept near the plant, they tried them, and they intuitively felt, where is it going in my body? What is it doing? But then it derived into a much more scientific, you know, approach, where now we can know the ingredients, the components, and this of each plant. But with intuitive herbalism, you kind of walk away with that. You walk away from that. Sorry, you just really tune in. You forget almost the name of the plant. So quite often when I have someone in the room, I don't tell them the name of the plant. And if they do know, if it's something very common, so sometimes they might work with their eyes closed, and sometimes they might see it, or sometimes it might be tea and they can't see what it is. Or I always say, even if you recognize it, forget everything you know about it, because it doesn't matter in this moment. And so, you know, something like, just to give you a very simple example, valerian, which is known to help sleeping, right, in the herbalist world. Well, actually, some people take valerian and are wired all night. So it's not that simple. You can't just say, because some people, being in that relaxed, deep relaxed state is actually deeply triggering. If through whatever trauma they've experienced, being relaxed means danger and abuse or whatever, they walk away from that. So if you give them valerian, they're more likely to be very wired. And that's not to say that it's like this for everyone. You know, they might have different experience, but it is really to recognize that that plant energy resonates with that person at that point in time. So it's not just good for sleep. It is going to be whatever resonate with each other in that moment. And yes, so in that sense, I don't really have, when I work through this inner work with the plants, I am not going in trying to say, this person's got heart issues, let's bring that plant in. And it's working a lot more as well as at an emotional level. So in that sense, you have a little bit of broad, I call it broad labeling. For instance, rose. Rose often touches people around nurturing, love, nostalgia. But saying that will bring someone, you know, so some people are very receptive to being nurtured, and other people will be triggered at the idea of being nurtured. So you see, it will bring completely different things out of each other, and it will also be manifested in their body in different places. So does that clarify a little bit?
Yeah,
quite
I
a
mean,
big difference.
absolutely, yeah.
And the whole idea is, if I am going to prescribe a traditional tincture with multiple herbs, you know, to address something specific, which is a body symptom, for me, it's very cool that we also go and listening through the inner work to the body, to what the body is trying to speak of. Because if we just give something, let's say, to get rid of menstrual pain, but we haven't heard what the body has to say, it's a forcing. It's let's heal, and healing actually doesn't happen through the pressure of needing to heal. Healing often just happens through the acceptance that that's where we're at right now, and we are just struggling, and just allowing the body to express, and then find when the trauma, because often it's memory in the at cellular level. So if you just go in there and go back to the felt experience of the trauma, that can be enough to just release and shift someone completely out of their symptoms, which is fascinating. And if I do give a tincture, I will know that the body has been heard, so it's going to be a lot more cooperative with the herbs. Otherwise, sorry, just to finish, otherwise what you do is you give something and it does take the symptom away, like paracetamol will take a headache away, but after a while people get immune. They say immune to, it's not that they get immune, it's like drug addicts. It's eventually the body gets used to it. It's because it hasn't been hurt, so it's pushing through another way. It's like taking drugs to remove pain. You need to increase the dose, and you keep needing to increase, because the body is still going to try to push through. Hey, I have something to say, listen to me. and then he'll find another door. So it can manifest in a more aggravated condition, or, you know, it's not to say it's always like this, but it will find other ways to push that kind of communication through, in my understanding anyway.
Yeah.
Gary, have you got something else you wanted to add? Because I've got a couple of things, but I don't want to jump in.
It's really just more like sounds like a very personal journey to yourself to where you've ended up at. Do you have like any recommendations where somebody might start with it? Should they just start with that traditional herbalism and then see how they personally grow, I would imagine?
Yeah, so that's very hard to answer in a way, because yes, absolutely. So for the first starting point, so I do also see patients only for herbs when they're not ready to go into inner work, because inner work require a willingness. You have to, and you have to be willing to go in and to see your own shit, basically, which is quite hard. You know, I'm sorry for the French word, but it is quite demanding and it's exhausting. And everyone, including myself, who's still, you know, I still do mind therapy, we will feel resistance, because these mechanisms are in place since trauma, or since for a long time, and those mechanisms are here it's a survival thing. You know, if somebody gets angry easily or is addicted to work, it's a protective mechanism to survive. So if you suddenly say, hey, let's take this away so you can have a better life, the first response is going to be, what, you want me to die? You know, because that's all it knows. So you're right, it is very hard to jump in that kind of work like that. So this is why I also do other things. So herbal teas, it's always a lovely intro, you know, starting with a lovely herbal tea, and just being aware to start, you know, that nature is around. So I offer things like forage course, cooking workshop, because actually simply thinking about what we feed ourselves with, you know, that's very important, the connection to food. That's actually one of the, you know, the first thing, whether we were breastfed, bottle fed, we have a very different and complex relationship to food, starting from that, you know, our early days in life. So it's very interesting, and just starting with food, because quite often you'll do the cooking workshop and everybody wants to start taking care of their health, and they know what to do, but they can't do it. So it's really nice to start with that, and then just be aware, okay, I said I would not eat sugar, but, you know, yet I keep falling back into my patterns. And then from that you go, okay, I might need a bit of limbic reprinting, which is the kind of birth into being method, which really helps with things like that. So starting by looking at how we manage our own lifestyle is a really lovely approach. And then, you know, cosmetics, so natural cream, or it's all about that presence, that connection. How do I treat myself every day? What am I doing for myself? And where I can't honor myself, what does that mean? Why? You know, it's not a big deal. It's not about judging myself for not being able to do it, but yeah, why am I not? And you just need to start little by little, those little awareness. You know, it's not gonna, it's overwhelming otherwise to change everything too quick, too soon. So yeah, I'd say sometimes only just starting with only herbs is always a good idea. And then when it doesn't work, it's that signal. Okay, now I need to go a bit further. Shall we deep dive? Yeah, but as a therapist, you know, I do often, the majority of the people who come are often coming to deep dive. You know, there is this saying that you attract, you know, there is a therapist for a type of patient, and so, and vice versa. So in my case anyway, a lot of the time, 80% I'd say.
Go for it, mate.
I tend to feel that there is an openness at the moment, just more generally, not just in some individual people, but that the sort of pressure cooker scenario that we've seen over the last 4 years now has meant that we are now finding more people willing to do that, what is often called things like shadow work or inner work or whatever, and are now having absolute revelations around these more intuitive ideas, let's just call them ideas, that are coming up within them. So I just wonder whether or not, when you're doing the work now, that the same goes for you, Magalie. Are you becoming more and more open and aware of things like, I don't know, there's a lot of talk about things like star families, and certainly this whole thing of sort of ancestral trauma that you've touched on. But does a whole other world behind that patient always open up for you? Or is that for you a process too, between the client and yourself?
Caspar, you're on form today. Yes, amazing question. So I think, because there's almost multiple questions in that one question.
Yeah, there are, and it might be that we have to leave a lot of it.
That's all right. Yeah,
time,
let's work with the. So and this is a very humble space. So if I hold healing for anyone, I'm holding space for a start. Yes, I'm not healing anyone. I'm not a healer. I'm a space holder, which is for me very important.
Distinction. Yeah.
And also it's not about, so I do not fix people, I don't heal them, I empower them, and I offer them almost, I bring myself to presence so they can bring themselves to presence, and I can only show them how I find my center so they can find their center. That's the starting point. But another really big part of that is when someone comes to me, as much as it's their healing, it's also my healing. And actually, that's true for anything, but it's really important to really be aware of that and being really humble. So, because for a starting point, you can have someone that comes in my space, and I can get triggered. I'm a human being, right? So I can get as triggered or more triggered. It's all possible, which is also why I do supervision as well on the side. I think that's really important to do, to keep that introspection. And but that, in all fairness, doesn't happen that often. I have it has happened. It doesn't happen that often, and the more it has happened, the less it happens in a way. But whenever someone is touching on any particular topic, there will always be a part of myself that will be touched by that same topic, because we are this multi-dimensional, multiverse, multifacets being that is what
quantum
we are.
Entanglement. Yeah.
And the closer we come to our center, so the more we become individual and able to just be ourselves, the more we become this mass consciousness at the same time, which is quite fascinating. So the more we set boundaries, and the more we say, I want this and I don't want this, the more we can feel the whole consciousness of everyone. So it's
totally
quite
agree with that.
interesting, because if you think about that notion of selfishness, which is such a detrimental word, because actually my encouragement is, yes, be selfish, because only through being selfish you will be touching into full altruism.
Yeah.
So yes, absolutely. And I do group processes as well, which is such a synergy. When we work, the birth into being work is a lot of group processes, and no matter whose process it is, we tend to work in group of 3 or 4. So you have one person, it's one person's process, but actually it's everybody's healing. And you'll have sometimes the whole room crying with that same person, or and it's just really powerful and beautiful to watch. So I think for me, yeah, it is unbelievably important to recognize that. And I'd say even more than this, I have noticed over the few years of doing therapy that you get themes. So when I'm working in a specific theme in my life, I'm going to get patients working with a very similar theme.
How interesting. That really is. Yeah, that's really great. Yeah. That's a great bit. Yeah, I mean, things like that, those are the things that we might take out and look at as separate verticals to go down, because something like that, just even you recognizing that, actually, and I'm not trying to pass myself off as anything else here, but or to talk down in any way, but for anybody to start to recognize these sorts of emerging talents, intuitive senses and whatever, this is a massive area that I think is very important for us as you said, as a sort of collective consciousness. Yeah, I think there's plenty to go into. I'm just conscious that if we open up another whole area, because I'd love actually to talk about this thing of, have you, what do you feel about this whole notion, for example, of soul? And that is, that's a big topic. So I don't think it's one to go into today.
Yeah. It's
How are we
wonderful.
for time, Gary?
No, it's time to wrap it up, unfortunately. Yeah.
Yeah.
Even though if you
Magalie,
go
I
on-
thought that was excellent. I mean, I expected it to be, but I'm glad that I really felt it was. And you've touched on so many areas that I think for hopefully the audience, certainly for me and for Gary, are just so prescient and important at the moment that, you know, if you do have the time, we'd love to have you back. We'll also put any information in our description section that will allow people to engage with you and your work, and any other reference material if you want to supply that. We'd be happy to do that. And we'd like to look at fostering sort of people's awareness of your journey, because your journey, as you're rightly pointing out, will be themed with a myriad of other people's journeys. And that's why I think it's so important.
Thank you so much. That was very, I mean, I really enjoyed this session as well. And we could put a next one on the soul.
Yeah, fantastic.
If you know, because as you said, it will be a whole session. So
it needs to be
probably
a whole one. Yeah. Good. All right. Look, for now, thank you very much, Magalie. Thank you to our audience. Thank you to you. Thanks to Gary.
Thank you, Gary. Lovely meeting you.
You're welcome.
We'll see you soon.
Take care.
See you soon. Take care. Bye.
Ciao. Bye-bye. Bye.